Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture on marginality and marginalization, concept and meaning. This lecture is part of your paper on media and margins. In this lecture, we will critically look and try to understand the concept of margins, marginality and marginalization. This lecture will help us appreciate the complexity and diverse meanings of these terms, as well as enable us to locate these terms according to the context that they are discussed in. Let us begin. Introduction. Margin, marginality and marginalization have been the center of discussion in the academic sphere since the last few decades. As stated before, these concepts have diverse meanings according to the context where these are discussed. Marginality is an important field of study and research. It is a debatable concept with a complex and wide range of meanings. Marginals are considered to be the oppressed and exploited sections of the society. It is considered to be a universal phenomenon. Margin in common parlance is defined by the edge or border of some object, phenomenon or act. It also denotes side, brink, fringe, boundary, limits, periphery and extremity. Generally, it is used in opposition to the mainstream. Marginality, on the other hand, is referred by many dictionaries as a noun to the adjective marginal. It is referred to the property of being marginal. It can be a position in a territory or a social position excluded from the dominant group or power center. Marginalization can be understood as a process of being marginal. The Oxford Dictionary of Sociology defines marginalization as a process by which a group or individual is denied access to important positions and symbols of economic, religious, or political power within any society. Marginality can have various definitions and meanings. Some of the broad and widely discussed categories are borderline, situated at the margin, meeting with two or more cultures, and so on, which might pose a dilemma. Svetlana Bankovskaya used the concept of marginal man introduced by Robert E. Park as central to her study of marginality. Marginality research should most importantly focus on the ways to disclose the social processes responsible for marginalization. In order to disclose the social processes responsible for marginalization, it is important to establish contingency of the term with basic sociological concepts that are generally used to understand the idea of marginality and conducting a theoretical operation of marginality in the context of processes responsible for destabilization of society, such as desocialization and resocialization, social, cultural or political exclusion, hybridization and diffusion. Classical sociology provides a strong base for the source of concepts and ideas related to the analysis of marginalization. Marginalization can be looked at from various perspectives. In the social science tradition, one of the first works on marginalization could be traced back to Simmel's article on the stranger and sociology of space, later redefined by Robert E. Park in his paper Human Migration and the Marginal Man. Further, A. Schutt's work on Stranger and Homecomer, G. H. Mead's work on the philosophy of the present, and Durkheim's work on anomie and moral community present a large range of studies relative to marginality. Sociological study on marginality focuses on two different approaches of marginality: the functional approach and the formal approach. The functionalist approach refers to the group view and focuses on the marginal's relation to the group. Identity and participation become the main criteria of the functionalist approach. Identity making itself is regarded as participation in the group. The functionalist approach to marginality also presents the negative aspect of marginality, which usually refers to lack of participation in the group, leading to deprivation and exclusion from the social structure that ultimately is marginalization. On the other hand, the formal approach focuses not on the relation to the group, rather one's relation to multiple groups in the society. People enter into the belt of marginalization because of their confrontation between two cultures or their positioning of being in betweenness. They possess the right to choose the dominant culture, leaving behind their own. But entering a new social structure, they identify oneself with means to enter a new bounded entity that will lead to the death of their own identity of origin. Whereas on the other hand, they can even choose their own original culture with the fear of domination and exploitation by the dominant culture. This leads to a situation of dilemma, and so the marginals choose to survive in between two cultures. But surviving between two cultures is itself a struggle. Here, in the context of media representation, it could be said that marginality poses a great challenge and opportunity to be represented in various forms of media. We are concerned with marginalization of ethnic and religious minorities, people with disabilities, old-aged, children, women, and sexual minorities. During the media processes, such categories of people are often overlooked and their experiences ignored. In this context, we can think of media representation in two ways. One, about reporting these various kinds of marginalized communities, and the other one is about their representation and employment in various media houses. It has been observed and reported from time to time that the media reproduces some of the daily discriminatory practices happening elsewhere in its own domain against members of marginalized communities. This process takes various forms like derogatory offensive speech and text to marginalize and exclude these communities from the media discourses. But at the same time, some sensitive media houses also generate discourses that attempt to identify the problems regarding discrimination of members of different marginalized communities. Marginality is considered by many as an involuntary position. The condition might arise from any individual, group, or community's position at a margin of social, economic, or political sphere, which might inhibit them from having access to the productive resources, thereby creating more marginalization and limiting their capabilities. Marginality is a complex condition of disadvantage that individuals and communities may experience because of vulnerabilities which may arise from unequal or inequitable environmental, ethnic, cultural, social, political, and economic forces. Marginality has been defined as a state of limbo between at least two cultural life worlds, and marginality as a social phenomena was first introduced by Robert Park in 1928. The concept has since entered the sociological and other social science disciplines. Sociologists and anthropologists have studied the issue of margins in various societies. Of late, it has become popular in the sphere of media as well. In the context of marginality, the readjustment process of migrant has been discussed by Park in his seminal essay. Robert Park argues that the inability of the marginal person to return unchanged to his or her original group and not being able to completely immerse them in the host culture put them in a difficult condition. Therefore, they are caught in a double ambivalence. Marginality as a term has multidisciplinary roots. It is mostly compared with the word exclusion. Bilson wrote in 2005 that after Robert Park's use of the term marginality, it has flourished, broadened, and expanded by the work of others. He suggests that in three different ways it has been used in the field of social science and specifically in sociology. These are cultural marginality, the dilemmas of assimilation and cross-cultural identities, social role marginality, an individual is often restricted to be a part of a superior group, and structural marginality, which refers to the disadvantaged position or powerlessness in terms of social, economic, and political dimensions. The more accepted definition of marginality refers to the lack of power and participation experienced by an individual, group, community, or territory. Marginalization is a multi-layered and elusive concept which can occur in various levels. A nation could be marginalized at the global level, whereas a community or society could be marginalized at the national or federal level. Factors relative to the rise of marginalization. A number of reasons are responsible for the marginal condition of people all around the globe. Lack of knowledge and awareness, absence of economic resources, lack of political rights, lack of recognition and power are few of the many reasons responsible for marginalization. The risk of reproducing marginality generation after generation is mainly because of the lack of consciousness among people, their inability to educate their younger ones. Various governmental and non-governmental organizations are struggling to decrease the level of marginalization by raising funds for homelessness, for education, or for providing meals during school hours. Despite all the efforts, there is still the difficulty in solving the problems of marginality because of the outcomes of globalization, such as rapid technological change, emergence of new ideologies, restructuring labor market, and so on. Jane Jensen quotes the political philosopher Iris Marion, who defines marginals as people the system of labor cannot or will not use. She claims marginalization as the most dangerous form of oppression, where a group of people are deprived from material requirements and alienated from participation in social life. Marginals are those unemployed youth, single mothers, orphans, physically disabled, people of the third world countries, people considering the streets as their roof, working laborers not earning enough to meet the needs of their families, discriminated victims of racism, lower caste sections, and so on. A wide range of people, as we have seen, enter the belt of marginality for various reasons. Jensen enlists three major factors which are responsible for marginalization. These are unemployment, poverty, and exclusion. Let us talk about unemployment. Being employed brings in well-being and participation in society socially, economically, and politically. Thus, lack of work and jobs mean economic hardship and failure to participate in society. In the present capitalist scenario, being unemployed is a sign of marginalization. Poverty. Poverty, being one of the causes of marginalization, has in itself certain complexities. Firstly, the measurement issues bring up the question that based on what criteria can one be termed as poor. This can be done either by measuring their low income cutoffs, LICO, or based on their fulfillment of basic needs. Many are using income based measures like LICO and basic need measures, whereas Human Poverty Index of the UN Human Development Report uses non-income dimensions of poverty. The second complexity of poverty is the reversibility of poverty, as many capitalist nations focus on limiting poverty if not eliminating it. In case of poverty as a problem relative to marginalization, it reflects that inhabiting in an area of poverty, long generations of poverty, and not earning enough to meet the basic necessities of life are causing marginalization. Marginalization in such cases occurs due to inegalitarian income distribution, ineffective social policies, individual circumstances, and so on. Let us now talk about exclusion. Exclusion brings in the division between the included majority and the excluded minority. Exclusion from the mainstream means separation from group or community. Excluded people are marginals because of their isolation from the social interaction process and their inability to participate in the group. Geographical isolation is an important cause of exclusion. Racial discrimination, gender discrimination, and many other forms of subordination are responsible for exclusion. It is an outcome of unawareness of one's own civil, political, and social rights. Focusing for the development of a more egalitarian society can be one of the ways of solving this problem. One of the significant researches on marginality is the differentiation between the sociological approach and the psychological approach of marginality. The sociological approach of marginality deals with the marginal's relationship and functions to the group. However, the psychological approach of marginalization deals with the marginal's feelings, consciousness, self-conscious sentiments, memories, and perceptions. Adam Weisberger argues that in order to resolve ambivalence, marginal persons use one or more of the following typology. Assimilation, which means the acceptance of the culture of the host society. Return, which refers to the returning back of the marginal man to his or her origin and trying to reintegrate oneself in the group to which he or she belongs. Transcendence, which is the search for a third path to overcome the problem of double ambivalence. And finally, poise, which means non-response leading to loneliness and anxiety. Thus, from our discussion, it can be claimed that marginality is the outcome when migrants of one culture come in contact with another alien culture, which may result in conflicts and also lead to the emergence of a new culture. The sociological view of marginality is considered as an important tool to understand immigrant groups, of understanding their consequences after coming in touch with the host culture. The extent of marginality cannot be objectively measured, as it is a concept of subjective meanings. Studies on marginality should measure the extent of marginality. There exists no such place on earth where there is no marginality. A small trace of marginality is present in every society, which means that a region has at least a minimum count of marginals. Marginality and market forces. Cause of unequal development in societies is rooted in the degree of social and spatial disparities. Most of the reasons reactive to development disparities are ingrained in the market factors. However, social and spatial disparities in standard of living are because of both market and non-market factors. One of the important concepts in relation to marginality is that of a problem region, which means the region of very slow development or no development at all. The emergence of such regions can be traced back from the core-periphery relationship, in which the cores are the developed nations and the peripheries are the underdeveloped nations. In this, the core nations exploit the natural resources and even manpower for their own development, leaving behind the peripheral nations to the adverse effects of marginality. Apart from the market conditions, non-market conditions are also responsible for marginality. Socially constructed barriers prevent some individuals and communities to access their rights and opportunities. The dominant group exercises power on other groups, which is because of the difference created by caste, gender, class, ethnicity, and so on. This type of marginality is termed as systematic marginality, which occurs in order to fulfill the interest of the dominant group. Examples of systematic marginality can be apartheid in colonial South Africa, Rhodesia, and tribal-based marginalization in Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Sudan. The systematic marginality also stems from ethno-cultural factors in two ways. Firstly, it arises due to colonial rule over the indigenous people, where the colonial rulers have the political and economic powers in their hands. Secondly, when there are conflicts between internal groups in a nation because of religion or race and other such factors. Media and marginality. Media, in principle, forms a strong platform to raise the voice of the oppressed and fight against injustice. It can contribute in various ways. These may be idealistic, optimistic, critical, and realistic. Media's proper contribution in supporting and raising the voice of the marginals depends on the interest and the role played by the media personnel. So, the presence of a strong and well-established media is important to raise the voice of the marginals. Media acts as a vehicle or obstacle to empower or disempower the marginal citizens. A sense of civic agency is must for social change, a change leading to welfare. Through the access of media, not only are they able to narrate their conditions of marginality, but simultaneously they become aware and conscious of their exploitation, which gives them the courage to fight for their rights and privileges. Mass media serves as a powerful weapon for those suppressed to call for mass mobilization. Marginals use media as a medium of representation, challenging the mainstream to establish their symbolic power. Deborah Gabriel mentions about the African Caribbean's use of blogging as a medium to contest and reconfigure race and gendered inequalities. Media here was used as a tool of resistance against racial oppression to construct black identity. Moreover, non-governmental organizations to a large extent help to facilitate equal portrayal of the marginals in the media by raising funds and advertisement. Through interaction with journalists, the NGOs ensure to provide the marginals a platform of dignity. It serves as a voice for the voiceless and the invisible. But it has also been observed that many victims of exclusion or marginals are afraid to speak about their oppression and injustice meted to them. Conclusion. Let us now sum up what we have learnt in this lecture. We found that some media discourses reproduce the existing discriminatory practices, while others can be regarded as part of the social practices attempting to eliminate discrimination against marginalized groups. It is frequently argued that media houses and media professionals construct and sustain inequality. They give privilege to few and marginalize many in the due course of time. The mainstream media are, of course, discursively active in this arena, remaining a powerful force in the shaping of popular understanding of citizenship. In a volume on media, margins, and civic agency, E. Thorson explores the discursive and structural reproduction of social, cultural, and political marginality via constructions of voiced and silence, orderly and disorderly, normative and non-normative, citizens and non-citizens in mainstream media and media policy. Those who find themselves marginalized by political rhetoric, mainstream media representation, or lack of representation sometimes find the means to push back. In another important volume on media, margins, and popular culture, he provides a vibrant snapshot of both established and emerging concerns around media representation and marginal identities, from representations of Dalits in Hindi cinema to self-representations of working-class Scottish women in community media. The collection of essays considered representation in various ways, such as the structural and ideological construction of marginality in state and media produced censorship or media scholarship itself, in representations of social marginality. Many people have started arguing that marginality is not simply deprivation, it can also create possibilities. In the era of social media, where people have access to blogs, mails, Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp, and other tools, the situation has also changed. Marginality is also refashioned as a commodity by and through media. This brings us to the end of our lecture. You are advised to read the module carefully for more details. For further study, do go through the extended reading list provided with the lecture and attempt all the questions given with it. Thank you.